Hi, I'm Pastor Lush, and I have a few things I would like to share with you regarding the daily prayer offices or the liturgical hours. I'm recording this video in our sanctuary. I have our whiteboard up here, but there is not great production quality with this video, so I'm going to point to things on the board, and you may or may not be able to see them, but such is life. The daily prayer offices are things that we are familiar with, though we might not call them by that name. About once a month in our congregation, we pray the Office of Matins. Apparently, one of the previous pastors had Matins as their favorite service. I'm fond of it. It's a nice change of pace. Maybe has a little bit different focus or emphasis. But it's a daily prayer office. And one of the things that I put on the board here, and again, trust me on this, is that office equals service. An officer is a servant, right? Many police departments have as their motto to protect and serve. Someone's elected to the office of treasurer. They are a servant. You would hope that the office of mayor, the office of governor, the office of president, they are public servants. So the daily prayer office is a service. And they are daily, and they're devotional, and they're ordered. Lord, teach us to order our days aright, to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. We generally find that when things are ordered, they go a little bit better. And they are daily, multiple times a day as well. These are the liturgical hours. There are 7 of them. And I wrote them on the board from Matins at 2 a.m. Can you pray the Matins service at 2 a.m.? Most of us are sleeping at that time. Some may be working the graveyard shift. Matins at 2 a.m., prime at 6 a.m., terce at 9 a.m., sext at 12 p.m., noon, none at 3 p.m., vespers at 6, and then compline at 7. This is an old ordering system, when the church really was the center of the village or town. And the bells would ring and summon you to prayer. As monasticism gained in numbers, as more and more men and women were becoming nuns and monks, as you had Augustinians and Benedictines and Franciscans, as you had those orders, the church would have these prayer services during the day. The bell would ring, you'd go to church, and then you'd go home. When the Matin service was done, you'd go back to your room and go back to bed, and then the bell would ring, and you'd get up for church again. You'd have breakfast and go start your day. And then as you're working, the bell would ring, and you'd stop what you were doing, and you'd go to church. And as we'll see when we look at the Matin service in detail, these were not long services. The sermon is optional. Typically, one hymn was sung. So these prayer services, 15, 20 minutes. It's a nice break. You stop what you're doing at work. You pray for 15 or 20 minutes at church, and then you go back to work. It was a different life back then. And When you went to work, there were no clocks to punch, no HR departments marking things down, nothing like that. So these daily offices. And while those names are odd, I think you and I can understand them a little bit. If something is prime, it's first. So really the first service of the day begins when the day starts, 6 a.m., and that's another oddity coming out of the Jewish tradition. There was evening and there was morning the first day. The day begins at sundown, 6 p.m., and goes over to 6 a.m., and the day starts. So the first thing is the prime service at 6. Terce is 3. Sext is 6. None is 9. So at the 3rd hour, at terce, you have worship. At the 6th hour, you have worship. At the 9th hour, you have worship. And here's a neat little rhyme that may help us. It says here the author is unknown, but that's okay. We've been the beneficiaries of great things from anonymous people before. At matins bound, at prime reviled, condemned to death at terce, nailed to the cross at sext, at none his blessed side they pierced. They take him down at vespertide, in grave at Compline lay, whence thenceforth bids his church observe her 7-fold hours alway. You can remember the Passion story. How at noon, at the 6th hour, darkness covered the land for 3 hours. And they didn't want the bodies of Jesus and the 2 criminals to be on the cross on Passover. So he died. They took his body down and laid him in the grave. How the church observes these prayer services. So now let's shift a little bit and talk about the Matins service in detail. And I will move the whiteboard just a little bit when we're finished with this material. But what I have here, I get out of this. This is our Lutheran service book. Matins is on page 219. And so we have 5 prayer services. We have Matins, Vespers, and Compline in our service book. We also have morning prayer and evening prayer, which are updates of Matins and Vespers. Maybe a little bit different focus, but we've retained the prayer offices in our book. And maybe if you went to a parochial grade school, high school, or college, maybe you were familiar in daily chapel. You would do the Matin service every Monday. Evening prayer in the evening time, or Thursdays was morning prayer. Fridays was one of the responsive prayer services, some of the smaller devotional services. As we'll see in a moment, the focus of the Matin service, psalms, readings, and prayer, a good opportunity to hear. And another thing, if we ever lament how little of the Bible we have committed to memory, don't want to give you an excuse or a cop-out. But again, think how different life was. Especially if you lived in a monastery or an abbey. You went to the 7 services. At least one psalm would be included in those services. So 7 psalms for 7 days, that's 49 psalms. In 3 weeks, you could have all 150 psalms spoken, read, heard. And what happens when you get to Psalm 150? You go back to Psalm 1 and come right back again. So you would hear these over and over and over and over again. There's a lot of joy in that. And then we'll talk about posture. Not how erect or standing, hunched over. But when the board is removed and we look at our altar area, again, we'll see what our posture is and what the focus also is. But the service begins with versicles, responsive portion. And then there's a seasonal acclamation. And they're listed as Common, Advent, and Lent. Advent and Lent really do run on parallel tracks. They are preparatory seasons. Advent, preparing for Christmas. Lent, preparing for Easter. So the common acclamations include the season of Christmas, Epiphany, Easter, and Pentecost. The special seasons of Advent and Lent have their own acclamations. Then that leads into the psalmody. Again, go to page 219 in your service book. The board, believe me, I wrote as neat as I could. It's just not very visible. Begins with the Venite. O come, let us sing to the Lord. That's what Venite means. With an optional additional psalm. When we pray the Matin service on Sundays, the psalm of the day becomes our optional additional psalm. So the focus there, Psalm 95, O come, let us sing to the Lord. And then whatever the psalm of the day happens to be. Then comes the office hymn. And remember, office hymn, office and service, synonymous. So the main hymn of the service happens after the psalms. And this would be, the hymn of the day as well. And when you look through the service, there's no opening hymn, there's no concluding hymn. So really just one hymn, which would help keep the service 15, 20 minutes. Then come the readings. We typically have our 3, Old Testament or first lesson, the epistle, and gospel. Responses are a little bit different. O Lord, have mercy on us. Thanks be to God. And I don't know where that comes from, why there's a difference. Typically we say, this is the word of the Lord, and we say, thanks be to God. Perhaps this is a way to distinguish the prayer services from the divine service, the service of Holy Communion that we see. Also, a thinking is that there's an optional sermon, but after each reading, there could be a brief message given. So, just some guesses as to why the response is different. And then we have the responsory, which is a brief thanksgiving hymn for the word that we heard. for the word that comes to us repeatedly. And there's a one for common time, for Lent, and for Easter. You've heard me say it a few times, and you're probably thinking, boy, that would be great. Following the responsory is an optional sermon, or what they call a catechetical instruction. Maybe reading something from a small or large catechism or one of our confessional statements. The canticle follows, and there are two choices: the Te Deum and the Benedictus. And we have options for some of the hymn versions of those. The Te Deum is, "We praise you, O God." And it is a creedal statement, really predating the creeds. The Apostles' Creed didn't take its final form until the 8th century. But you and I in the church were singing the Te Deum centuries before that. And you can see there, praise to God, who is holy, 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 whose Son is true and adorable, worthy of adoration, and the Holy Spirit. A good creedal hymn. The Benedictus is also there. Zechariah sang as he held his son John. John, the forerunner of Jesus. Blessed be the Lord, and that's what Benedictus is. For he has come to his people and redeemed them. So some canticles, biblical canticles. Then the other focus is on prayer. Kyrie, Lord's Prayer, Prayer of the Day, additional prayers. In the Matin service, we have the Collect for Grace. In the Vesper service, it's the Collect for Peace. The focus of the Matin service is on prayer, the Word, the Psalms. And so we devote a lot of our time to it. And then it finishes up with a Benedicamus and a benediction. The Benedicamus is, let us bless the Lord. And the benediction is God's peace to us. So let me move the board away for just a moment, and we'll spend a few more moments just looking at our chancel area and how it might be a little different than what it typically looks like on a Sunday morning. So from where we're looking now, we can see our main altar, and then over there is our lectern. Behind me back there is the pulpit. Our focus is where it is with our other Sunday services. See the cross there? Our processional cross against the wall, our altar cross there. But we're all looking the same way. Now we move the altar book to the front. And I do not go behind the altar. The versicles, the psalm, the Te Deum or the Benedictus, the prayers, the benediction at the end, all from in front of the altar. It is not a service where there is much giving. I say you can't make it any more lovely than it already is. And so for a lot of our service, that's what we're looking at. And the lessons are read from the lectern. And our focus is where it's supposed to be. The gifts won on the cross, the gifts that come down from the cross. And I said that's part of our posture. What are we receiving? Or maybe what is the Lord giving to us? Now, in our particular service, we add a couple more hymns. We have the office hymn, a hymn before the sermon, and a closing hymn. Because we're Lutheran and we like to sing hymns. That's the Matin service. During Lent, we pray the Vespers service in the evening, and it looks very much the same. What is God giving? What are we receiving? How are we living the gifts of God? So that's a little bit about the prayer offices, the liturgical hours, in particular, the Matins service. Thank you for your attention tonight. Pray you learned something